I was only 20 when I first stepped into this empty shell of a house. The walls were bare, the floors cracked, the roof leaking. But I saw a future here. With my own hands, I scrubbed, painted, patched, and built until every corner carried my fingerprints. For decades, this was more than a house. It was a home. I raised my children here. I sacrificed sleep and comfort so they could grow up safe, fed, and loved. Every brick holds a memory, a birthday candle blown out, a Christmas morning laugh, a tear shed in silence. And yet, somewhere along the way, I became invisible. My sacrifices became expected. My voice went unheard. They walk these rooms as if they were always theirs, as if I am only a guest in the very home I built. Now I hear whispers behind closed doors. My daughter's voice, softer than before, carrying words I never thought I'd hear. She's lived here long enough. It's time she leaves. I built this house with my life, but they are forcing me out. The night was quiet, and I thought I was alone. I had stayed up late, rinsing dishes that no one else bothered to touch. My hands moved slowly through the warm water, the kind of work that calms the heart when it is too heavy to rest. Then I heard them. Claire's voice first, low, deliberate. "Michael, we can't keep living like this. She's always here, always in the middle of everything." I froze, my fingers gripping the edge of a glass. They were in the next room, thinking I was asleep. Michael's reply came sharper, with no hesitation. "This house should finally be ours. We've waited long enough. She's old, she'll understand. Or she won't. Doesn't matter." My breath caught. My own daughter. The little girl I once held against my chest when storms shook this roof, now plotting to take the roof away from me. I pressed my back against the kitchen counter, holding the wet towel in my hands. I wanted to scream, to tell them this house existed because of me, that without my years of sacrifice none of this would stand. But the words stayed trapped in my throat. When their voices faded, I wiped the last plate with trembling fingers, and the kitchen light felt colder than ever. The next morning, Claire avoided my eyes at breakfast. Michael smiled as if nothing had been said, and I poured the coffee in silence, carrying the weight of their betrayal inside my chest. Breakfast used to be my favorite time of the day. I would wake early, prepare eggs, toast, and fruit, and wait for everyone to gather at the table. It was noisy, imperfect, but it was family. Now the air felt heavy, like no one wanted to speak first. Michael scrolled through his phone. Claire sipped her coffee without looking up, and the children pushed their food around in silence. It was Emma who finally broke it. Her small voice carried across the table. "Grandma, are you going to leave us?" The fork slipped from my hand. I looked at her wide eyes that held more fear than a 10-year-old should ever carry. Jack, sitting beside her, stared at me too, waiting for an answer I didn't know how to give. Claire's eyes shot toward her daughter, sharp and embarrassed. "Emma, that's enough!" she snapped, then forced a smile that fooled no one. But Emma's words stayed hanging in the air, echoing louder than any argument could. Children see what adults try to hide. They had heard the whispers, felt the tension, understood more than anyone wanted to admit. I reached across the table and touched Emma's hand. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered, though my heart trembled. Because deep inside, I wasn't sure that was true. Later that afternoon, while folding laundry in Claire's room, I opened a drawer to put away a sweater. That's when I saw it. A card tucked between receipts, the name of a lawyer printed in bold letters. My knees weakened. It wasn't just whispers. They were making plans. A week later, Claire came to me with a stack of documents in her hands. She placed them on the coffee table as if it were nothing more than a chore. "Mom," she said lightly, "these are just for taxes. Michael thought it would be easier if we handled them all together." You don't need to read everything. Just sign at the bottom." Her tone was casual, but her eyes avoided mine. My chest tightened. I reached for the papers slowly, my fingers brushing across the thick pages. At first, the words blurred together. Legal language, endless paragraphs. But then I saw it. Property transfer agreement. My name. Their names. Spaces for signatures that would erase me from my own home. I looked up at her. "Claire, do you know what this is?" She pressed her lips together. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." My heart cracked at the way she said it. Harder for her? What about me, the woman who scrubbed these floors, patched these walls, built a life brick by brick? I set the papers down without signing. My hands shook, but my voice stayed calm. "No, I will not give you this house." For the first time, she looked directly at me. Her eyes were cold, unfamiliar. "You don't understand. Things will be better this way." Then Michael walked in, his smile sharp as glass. He glanced at the unsigned pages and leaned close to me. "Don't worry," he said softly, almost kindly. "We'll find another way." And in that moment I knew they wouldn't stop until I was gone. It was a Tuesday morning when I walked to the store I had built with my own hands. For years, it had been more than a business. It was a gathering place, a place where neighbors came not just to buy, but to talk, to share their lives. My name was written into its walls as surely as it was written on the receipts. But that morning, something was wrong. The door didn't open. I tried the key again and again, but the lock had been changed. Through the glass, I saw Michael inside. He was speaking with a man in a suit, showing him papers, gesturing proudly as if the place were his. When he noticed me outside, he smiled, not warmly, but with the satisfaction of someone who had already won. I knocked on the glass. He came to the door, opened it just wide enough to speak, and said, "You shouldn't be here anymore. It's all legal now." "Legal?" I whispered. My voice felt small, almost foreign. He stepped back, letting the lawyer glance at me like I was a stranger. "The business needed new management. You weren't capable of keeping it alive. This is for the best." I wanted to fight, to scream, to tear the papers from his smug hands. But instead, I stood there, frozen. Customers walked by, whispering as they passed. Some avoided my eyes, others looked at me with pity. My cheeks burned, but I refused to let a tear fall where they could see it. Slowly, I turned away, my shoulders heavy, my steps unsteady. The store I had built, the pride of my life, was no longer mine, and the betrayal was no longer silent. It was written in ink, sealed in law, and displayed for everyone to see. The day came quietly, without warning. Claire stood in my bedroom doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes colder than I had ever seen them. "Mom," she said firmly, "you need to start packing. Michael and we've decided it's time. We'll help you find somewhere else." Her words struck harder than any blow. Somewhere else. As if I were a burden to be relocated, as if the house I had built with sweat and sacrifice no longer had room for me. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long moment, staring at the photographs on the dresser. My children as babies, birthdays with balloons, nights when laughter filled these walls. Memories lived here. My whole life lived here. My hands trembled as I pulled a suitcase from the closet. I folded clothes with care, though each piece felt like it carried the weight of years. Dresses I had worn to graduations, sweaters I had mended with tired fingers. I packed what I could, but most of my life had no place in those 2 small bags. From the hallway, I heard Michael's voice, sharp and impatient. "She's taking too long." I zipped the suitcase and stood, my knees weak. As I walked toward the door, my eyes swept across the room one last time. The walls seemed to watch me, whispering back every sacrifice I had made. At the doorway, I paused. I turned to the house itself, the house that had been my companion, my shelter, my prison, my pride. And under my breath, I whispered, "I built you. Don't forget me." Then I stepped outside, leaving everything I had ever known behind. That night, I walked down the street with my 2 suitcases dragging behind me. The house glowed warmly from the windows, but I no longer belonged to it. Each step away felt like a piece of me was being torn off. I stopped in front of Rosa's door. For a moment I hesitated. She was my neighbor, kind but not family. What right did I have to show up with nothing but broken pride and 2 bags of clothes? Still I knocked. The door opened and Rosa's face softened the moment she saw me. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She simply said, "Come in, Evelyn." Her home was small, cluttered, filled with bright colors and the smell of cinnamon. It wasn't mine, but it was warm. She led me to her couch, and I sat down, my body heavy with exhaustion. For hours I stayed silent. Finally the dam inside me broke. My voice cracked as I whispered, "They threw me out, Rosa. My own daughter. She chose him over me." Rosa placed a blanket over my shoulders and sat beside me. "You've given them everything," she said gently. "Now it's time you give something to yourself." I wanted to argue, to say I was too old to start again, too tired to fight. But the words wouldn't come. All I could do was cry softly into the blanket, while Rosa stayed beside me, steady and unshaken. That night I fell asleep on a stranger's couch, but in my heart, a small seed of something new began to stir, something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The mornings in Rosa's kitchen were different. Her little house was modest, her table scratched and worn, but there was a comfort there that my old home had long lost. One morning, while helping her clean a cabinet, I found something I hadn't touched in years: my old recipe book. The pages were stained with flour and sugar, corners curled from time. My handwriting danced across every page: pies, cookies, breads, the meals I had made for my children when they were small. I ran my fingers over the worn cover, and a memory rose up: the laughter of Claire and her brother as they licked spoons, the smell of cinnamon filling the kitchen. Back then, love was as simple as warm bread on a winter morning. Rosa noticed my hands trembling. "You should bake again," she said. "People around here would buy from you. They'd be lucky too." At first, I laughed. What could an old woman with no home and no business offer anyone? But Rosa pushed gently. "You have skills, and you still have heart. That's more than enough." So I tried. That afternoon, I baked a batch of cinnamon rolls. The smell drifted out through Rosa's open window, and by evening, neighbors stopped by to ask if there were any left. The next day, I baked more. Orders began to come, a few dollars here, a few dollars there, but more than the money, it was the look in people's eyes. They remembered me not as the woman who had been thrown out, but as Evelyn, the woman who could turn flour and sugar into comfort. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't disappearing. I was building something again, with my own 2 hands. Not for them, for me. Word travels quickly in a small town. As I carried boxes of warm bread into the cafe one morning, I overheard 2 women whispering at the counter. "Michael's business is sinking," one said. "They spent too much, too fast." "And Claire?" the other asked. "She looks miserable. People say they fight every night." I didn't join their gossip, but I didn't have to. The truth was written on Claire's face the last time I saw her. Her polished smile had cracks. Her voice, once sharp and certain, trembled when she spoke. Later that week, as I delivered pastries to the community center, I saw them myself. Michael stood in the parking lot, his voice raised, his hand cutting the air as he argued with Claire. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, her arms crossed tightly, her eyes glistening but unwilling to fall. People passed by, pretending not to watch, but everyone noticed. For years they had stood tall, acting untouchable. But now, the walls they had built around themselves were breaking piece by piece. I didn't feel joy in their suffering, but I couldn't ignore the quiet justice in it either. They had taken everything from me, convinced they were stronger, smarter, untouchable. And yet here I was, with flour on my hands and hope in my heart, while their lives unraveled for all to see. That afternoon, Rosa came rushing in with a flyer. "Evelyn, look," she said, pointing at the page. "The town is hosting a charity banquet. They're looking for a caterer." My hands shook as I read the address. The event would be held at my old house, the very place they had thrown me out. The night of the banquet, my heart pounded as I carried trays of pastries up the familiar walkway. The house stood before me, its windows glowing, its walls freshly painted, yet somehow colder than I remembered. When I stepped through the door, memories rushed in. Every corner spoke to me, the hallway where Claire took her first steps, the dining room where birthdays were celebrated, the kitchen where I once stood for hours baking late into the night. But now it wasn't my home. I was here as a guest. The guests filled the rooms with polite laughter and clinking glasses, and then I heard it. "Grandma!" Two small voices cut through the noise. Emma and Jack ran toward me, their little arms wrapping around my waist, their faces bright with joy. I bent down, holding them tightly, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. Across the room, Claire stood frozen, her eyes locked on mine, guilt flickering across her face like a shadow she couldn't hide. She looked thinner, older, worn down by the life she had chosen. And Michael, he didn't smile this time. His eyes narrowed as if my presence were a threat. He stood stiff, his jaw tight, watching me as though I had stolen something from him. But I hadn't stolen anything. I had earned this moment. The people around me weren't whispering about my shame anymore. They praised my food, complimented my strength, told me how much they admired that I had started again from nothing. I wasn't invisible. Not here, not anymore. As the night went on, I moved through the house with calm steps, not as its owner, not as its victim, but as a woman who had built her life twice, once for them and now for myself. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the house belonged to me. I felt like I belonged to myself. The banquet was ending when Claire found me outside. The night air was cool, the sky painted with the last light of sunset. She stood on the porch steps, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale and tired. "Mom," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "Come back. Move in again. We need you." For a long moment I simply looked at her. My daughter, once so sure of herself, now broken by choices she had made. I saw the little girl she used to be, hiding behind the woman she had become. But the truth was clear. She didn't want me back because of love. She wanted me back because her world was falling apart. I shook my head gently. "No, Claire, I can't." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please. We'll make it different this time." I placed a hand on her shoulder, steady but firm. "You forced me out, remember? You made me believe I didn't belong here, and as painful as it was the best gift you ever gave me." She looked at me, stunned. "I have a life now," I continued. "A life that is mine, a home that may be small, but it's filled with respect, with dignity, and with people who see me." Behind her, Michael appeared at the doorway, his expression tight with anger. But I didn't even look at him. My words weren't for him. They were for me. I turned, walking down the steps, my heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, I was not leaving something behind. I was moving toward something better. The weeks after the banquet moved quickly. My little bakery table in Rosa's kitchen grew into something bigger. Neighbors came every morning for bread. People placed orders for birthdays and weddings, and soon I had more work than I ever imagined. It wasn't grand, it wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every dollar, every smile, every thank you belonged to me, not borrowed, not taken, not forced. One evening, as I stood by the oven with flour dusting my hands, I caught my reflection in the window. For the first time in years, I saw myself not as someone's mother, not as someone's burden, but as Evelyn, the woman who survived being thrown out of her own home and found a new one within herself. I thought I had lost everything when they forced me out, but I hadn't lost myself. And in the end, that was the only thing I truly needed. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been cast aside by the very people you loved the most, know this: you are not finished. Your story can begin again, no matter your age, no matter how heavy the loss. Share your story in the comments. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like mine. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well.